someone who lives 2 blocks behind me that uses a mobility device and has a very aggressive golden retriever, and she has put a cape on it that matches one of the organizations that's here, the same kind of color and shape. And for years,
Really?
it's gone on transit with no issues. She's been reported to the authorities several times. She attacked my dog by the face because I couldn't go anywhere because I was standing in an elevator door. And
Unbelievable.
yet she's still on transit with no issues.
And yet
everywhere you go.
that really that's offensive to me, and I'm not Canadian. Okay, an
Yeah,
American.
well, it's a human right. I would need to know that I have the right that I can go about my business and come in and out of an elevator without being cornered by a dog that shouldn't be there.
And
Right?
does
Someone will be accountable for
does this neighbor? I'm sure this neighbor knows that you're the president of a
it.
school, right?
Yep. Yeah, they do. And they've encountered other dogs. They've been stopped by the police, and they continue to do it anyway. And so who's really accountable here if there's no actual recourse? Like, nothing's, I think at most they've gotten a slap on the wrist at this point, but obviously it's not doing anything, and that doesn't change. That could have been the end of my dog's career. Now, thankfully, a really good dog, and recovered from that better than I did. Like, I was like really shaken and worried about going through elevator doors, especially knowing that this person is in my neighborhood going through my transit area. And it's appalling to me that there's no one being accountable for stuff like this.
Well, I do not comment on laws in other countries because it's not my business. But in my opinion, in the United States, I think that we do need to have laws, if federal, federal coding that forbids you, number one, forbids people from doing that. By the way, everything I'm saying is my opinion. It's not facts. These are opinions, and if you do not like it, listener, you do not need to agree with me. This is completely my opinions. I think there should be laws that say that it's, number one, you aren't allowed to do this in my country, and if you are allowed, there needs to be consequences, though. And I think the truth of it is that our country is spending the resources and money doing other things. We're spending, I mean, this gets us off topic, but we're spending our resources on health issues, people with other serious problems like drug substance abuse things. Whereas I don't know, but my message is, please stop training your own dog. It's just not a good idea. All right.
I think not even needing to get into like costs and politics.
Mm-hmm.
Information is free, education is free. So the more we educate our publics and our community around us to know when they need to speak up, say something, especially as a business owner or a manager of a public place, knowing when you have the obligation to say no to the presence of a dog that's obviously not acting appropriate. And that is, you don't need to be a dog trainer or dog professional to see if a dog is behaving out of place or flailing around or eating things and getting its face into things that shouldn't be there. And so the more we as a community educate and speak up and have less tolerance for it, that doesn't cost anything. We don't have to get into politics. Like, that's just us looking out for our communities, right?
Oh, absolutely. But still, there should be some consequence, because the problem in the States has gotten to the point where people have literally had to go to court and had legal issues. I mean, we shouldn't have to have legal issues over something as simple as knowing how to treat animals. I mean, that should be something that people should know how to do. But then again, apparently, if you're the president of a school and your neighbor is willing to have your dog attacked, then I don't know. I don't know when these types of strange things end. That's highly strange.
And I could get into all the other stuff, with our politics here. And I know our government has, and lots of governments are trying to enforce situations where there's schools or dogs that are only trained from Assistant Dog International or IGDF schools, which is the Guide Dog Federation, and which is great. But at the same time, there needs to be a bit more than that. It needs to be also the government's creating opportunity for new schools, because that's our biggest problem as a newer program, because of the hoops we have to jump through and the way that our local government has changed in the last couple of years. We've kind of been pigeonholed, and it has have a lot of other professionals that had programs going that now don't, and that doesn't help the population either to create I guess a closed monopoly where other professionals cannot build up enough to go for things like ADI or IGDF, and that's a whole other story as well. But yeah.
Sure, sure. Outstanding. Great, great. Okay, so I mean, I have to be nosy. So this neighbor, let's say her name is Sarah, or Maggie or something, or Mary. Have you ever, called her and say, hey, Mary, this isn't okay? Have you addressed it with her? Have you tried to explain and educate her why it's not okay?
Funny enough, this person did actually approach our program at one point and basically just said that they wanted one of our vests, and we said no. And so they do kind of avoid us, myself and anyone who's coming in my direction, because she's not a direct neighbor. I think she's a couple blocks over. So we end up encountering most, around transit, around the train line here. And so they very much know what they're doing, and she goes the other direction when she sees us coming, because she knows that we will pick up the phone and make sure that we're safe, whether that's because someone's taking a video of what she's doing because they're worried about their dog, or they're calling transit police. And when people do what they know that they're not supposed to be doing, like, there's not much you can do at that point. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry for that. It's very frustrating. Um, yeah, luckily I live in a very small town now where I do not need to deal with those types of problems. But yeah, if it was me, I would have certainly certainly would have written, letters to, the jurisdiction, the authorities for sure, hand delivered and everything. You know.
Well, I
No,
think,
no. I mean, that's how. No, that's the appropriate way of doing it in the states. If you have that, yes, go, yes.
yeah, and same thing here. And I think for us, us being a smaller program, the bigger we get, the more of a voice we're going to get, and we hope that we can continue to kind of change and push for things. And because education's a big issue here as well. And so in our mind, every year that goes by, we're just kind of plugging forward. We keep having some pretty amazing things happening. And the way that I see it, even though things aren't great now, the bigger we get and the better we get, and the more we continue to produce really good dogs, is just going to help our cause and make our voice louder with issues like this.
Without doubt, without doubt. Very good. Well, that's so good. And let's take a look here. So, listener, I came in contact, or I reached out to Danielle through our group, where many of us blind people know each other. And on a much lighter and equally interesting note, why don't you talk within the remaining 9 minutes in regards to the mentoring that you do, and how you became a mentor, and why you do mentoring in our group, and things like that, and what you can tell us about that. It's pretty cool.
Yes, absolutely. So I, as I said in the beginning, firmly believe in entrepreneurism with people with disabilities, especially blindness, and kind of exceeding the box of expectations that our society thinks that we can fulfill. And so everything with Leash of Hope, I built from the ground up. I've also been consulted and mentored the start of a couple of other smaller businesses. Last year, I also was awarded with the L'Oreal Paris Women of Worth Award for the work that I do with Leash of Hope. So I have a lot to offer as far as a mentor, and with that idea that we as people with disabilities should not be discounted and can do great things with whatever we're passionate about and whatever we put our minds to. And sometimes that means having a level of, or awareness of logistics, and working out those little pieces, and knowing how to build those pieces, and where to take the next steps and things. And sometimes that can be a little bit tricky if you don't know where to start. So that's where I can kind of come in sometimes. And sometimes as a mentor, I'm also even just saying to people like, yes, this is very achievable. And it seems really silly, but sometimes people need to hear that what they're doing is very achievable. God knows I never expected 5 years later to be running Leash of Hope to the size that it is. We have 30 plus dogs to have won that award. This year I was featured on a wellness TV show that's here in Canada on Accessible Media Inc. called Mindset Go, working with a Paralympian, just to keep my, I guess, was my stance of supporting, I guess, wellness and health in the disability world. And just because you have a disability doesn't mean you can't be healthy and active, and so it represented everything I stood for. And even though it was incredibly hard to be so vulnerable on a TV show and with a full hour of just watching myself or listening to myself, which was very strange, it's doable. Your dreams are doable, and just because you have a disability does not mean it needs to get in your way.
Sounds great. Perfect. Yeah. And yeah, I have found the same, the same is true. Podcasting. Do you have a podcast yourself?
It's on my list. It hasn't happened yet.
Oh, please make it happen. Please make it happen.
I would love to. I need to clone myself first, maybe a few more times. Just because
you've done a magnificent episode. I've absolutely loved recording this episode with you. Actually, I thought you were a little nervous before you came on, but you really did a great job. I think that you should certainly get into podcasting. I got into it. So a little bit more about me. I'm a teacher, as many of you at home know. I'm a teacher, and that's my job. I work online, teaching English as a second language. I've been doing that for about 5 years. And then, about last August or September, I was, scrolling through the podcasts, and there was like one or two podcasts about blindness issues and blind people that I really enjoyed, but I felt that it just wasn't approachable. It just wasn't doing it for me. So then I thought, well, since I have so many complaints about podcasts, why don't I create my own thing? And then I just sort of dove right into it. It wasn't until very recently, and it certainly was not until a couple days ago, that I made it all the way to radio. I started out by doing basically monologues. So that's where you start with podcasting. You do monologues where you have to stand listening to the sound of your own voice and talking about issues that are meaningful to you. And I built that up and up and up and up. And then eventually I was able to get some guests, and then the guests built up, and then the interest built up, and then I switched to a platform. And then the turning point, I guess, for this is when I made it all the way onto Apple Podcasts. And that was a shock that I was Apple Podcast material, apparently. So once that all happened, then I thought, well, this might really help one person. And if Erin's opinion helps one person, if it helps even one person in Vancouver know about your organization, that makes it worthwhile. By the way, so what if you're at home and you want to get in touch with Leash of Hope? How would they go about doing that? Give yourself some plugs. Go.
Okay. So, and first of all, at the beginning, I wasn't nervous. I love talking to people. I had a kitten
Great.
putting up the curtains, so I was a little distracted.
The curtain, but we just need audio. You don't need curtains.
I know. No. Because I'm at home, and I have a
Oh.
young kitten, and he was trying to climb the curtains. So that's why I was like, oh no, please don't go up there.
Very good. Three and a half minutes.
Okay,
Very
so
good.
that was where my nerves were coming from.
All right.
But, if you want to reach me, you can, of course, social media is a big one, whether it's through looking at Leash of Hope Assistance Dogs on Instagram or Facebook. On Facebook on Mondays, I actually do lives, and, as you said, do a bit of a monologue and just kind of chat into the abyss with myself. And for any of our listeners or audience there, we also have a website, which is leashofhopeassistancedogs.com. You can find us through there. And I'm sure, Erin, you can probably put a link to that if for any of your listeners, if they're interested. And we at this point are not just in Vancouver, BC. We have been spreading throughout Vancouver and even into the U.S. into Washington. So.
Oh, excellent. So you do have a branch in Washington State.
Well,
Yeah.
we've been people come work with us, and then they end up going home